Have you ever wondered if we are truly living up to our full potential as human beings? Have you ever felt that something invisible, perhaps even ancient, blocks our evolution as a species? What if the answer lies buried not only in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia but also in a controversial theory that points to an extraterrestrial origin of humanity? Today we are going to dive into one of the most fascinating and controversial mysteries of alternative history: the Anunnaki, beings who, according to some modern scholars and theorists, came from another planet, created humanity, and, even worse, may still be controlling us today. But to understand where this theory comes from, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before the pyramids of Egypt, before the great civilizations of Greece or Rome, there was a land called Sumer, located where southern Iraq is today. There, more than 5,000 years ago, one of the first known civilizations flourished with its own writing system, legal system, advanced agriculture, and, of course, religion. And at the center of this religion were the Anunnaki. In the Sumerian cuneiform records, the Anunnaki were presented as powerful gods, children of Anu, the god of the sky. They held different divine roles, often related to fertility, justice, the earth, and the underworld. Some texts depict them as judges of the dead. Others show them deciding the fate of humans. In short, they were extremely respected and feared deities. Most scholars understand the Anunnaki as part of the mythological pantheon of Mesopotamia, comparable to the gods of Greece, Egypt, or India. However, this narrative changed radically in the 20th century, when a theory emerged that reinterpreted these ancient myths in a new light. Or, for some, in a new darkness. The person responsible for this reinterpretation was author and researcher Zecharia Sitchin. In his series of books called The Earth Chronicles, Sitchin claimed that the Anunnaki were not just mythological symbols but real beings of extraterrestrial nature. According to him, the Sumerians were not inventing stories. They were recording, in their limited language of the time, what they really saw and experienced. The gods were actually technologically advanced aliens who visited Earth tens of thousands of years ago. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, whose extremely long orbit kept it distant from Earth for millennia, only returning periodically. Nibiru would be part of a hidden solar system, which even today is debated by astronomers and enthusiasts as Planet X. According to this theory, the Anunnaki arrived on Earth in search of gold, a mineral that was vital to them for maintaining the atmosphere of their home planet or for technological purposes not yet understood. Here enters one of the most controversial and intriguing parts of this story. To extract gold from Earth, the Anunnaki initially did the work themselves. But over time they grew tired of the arduous task. The solution? Create a race of workers from the primitive beings already inhabiting the planet. Using their advanced knowledge of genetic engineering, the Anunnaki modified the DNA of Earth's hominids, giving rise to Homo sapiens, us. But they did not create us as fully free or developed beings. According to the theory, the Anunnaki designed humans with genetic and spiritual limitations, aiming to keep us as an obedient, controlled, and subordinate race. Our biology, our intellectual and spiritual capacities, were intentionally restricted so that we would never surpass the limits set by our creators. This is one of the central ideas behind the thesis that the Anunnaki blocked or still block human evolution. Many modern theorists claim there is a kind of programming in our DNA, a set of instructions or blocks that prevent the awakening of higher abilities such as telepathy, self-healing, extreme longevity, interdimensional connection, and full consciousness. In other words, we live far below our true potential because of an ancient and hidden external intervention. For supporters of this view, the Anunnaki's control did not end in the past. On the contrary, it has become more sophisticated. According to these theories, descendants or representatives of the Anunnaki still influence the course of humanity through global elites, dogmatic religions, financial institutions, and media systems. These social mechanisms work as tools of distraction, division, and manipulation, keeping humanity asleep and away from its true nature. Not coincidentally, Many associate this idea with the concept of a spiritual matrix, an artificially constructed reality to keep human beings disconnected from the truth. A social, cultural, and energetic illusion that prevents us from awakening to who we really are. From this perspective, the modern world is a great mental and vibrational simulation, where the truth is constantly hidden, and spiritual seekers are seen as threats to the established structure. This narrative resonates with many of the dilemmas of the contemporary world. The feeling of spiritual emptiness, distrust in institutions, rising inequality, and the loss of connection with nature and with others. Even without concrete evidence, the idea that there is a greater force preventing us from growing finds fertile ground in times of crisis and collective disillusionment. On the other hand, there are also more symbolic and less literal versions of this theory. Some spiritualists and esoteric scholars believe that the Anunnaki represent archetypes of the collective unconscious, internal forces symbolizing power, fear, control, and awakening. Within this interpretation, the supposed prison created by these beings would actually be a metaphor for our own mental and emotional limitations, conditioning imposed by society and ourselves. Liberation then would be an internal process rather than an external event. There are also those who believe that the Anunnaki's dominion is coming to an end. According to this view, Earth and its inhabitants are entering a new era, a time of vibrational ascension, in which human consciousness begins to expand beyond old paradigms. This phenomenon has been called the collective awakening, and involves growing interest in practices such as meditation, self-knowledge, consciousness expansion, DNA activation, and reconnection with the universe. For these thinkers, we are living through the final chapters of an ancestral cycle of manipulation. The global crisis we face, in environmental, political, spiritual, and emotional spheres, would be a catalyst for this transformation process. More and more people are questioning reality, breaking away from dogmas, and seeking answers outside traditional structures. This global movement would, in part, be a reflection of the collapse of the old Anunnaki programming. However, it is important to make a clear distinction between myth, theory, and fact. The scientific and archaeological community rejects most of these ideas due to a lack of concrete evidence. The translations made by Sitchin, for example, have been severely criticized by experts in Semitic languages and cuneiform, who point out numerous errors in interpretation and inventions. For academia, the Anunnaki remain mythological figures of a polytheistic religion, unrelated to aliens or genetic engineering. Still, the fascination persists. Perhaps because the story of the Anunnaki, regardless of its literal truth, speaks directly to something deep within us. The desire to know where we came from, who we are, and what our true purpose is. By raising the hypothesis that we were created by an advanced civilization and limited in our potential, this theory confronts us with fundamental questions about freedom, identity, and evolution. What if all of this is true? What if there are indeed hidden forces operating for millennia to prevent the evolution of humanity? What if the old gods are still among us, hidden in plain sight, manipulating global events to keep the ancient system running? Or is all of this just a new guise for old mythologies? A modern way of telling ancient stories and making sense of the chaos of the present? Either way, the narrative of the Anunnaki challenges us to think outside the box. To question not only the past but also the present and the future. To reflect on what holds us back and what might set us free. If you've made it this far, it's probably because you feel there is something beyond what we've been taught. And that is the first step to any awakening. Doubt, curiosity, the desire to know more. So if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and turn on notifications. That helps a lot to keep this project alive and allows us to continue producing deep, investigative, and free content. And tell me in the comments, do you believe the Anunnaki really exist? Or is all of this just a metaphor for our own power yet to be recognized? I really want to know your opinion. See you in the next video.